For years, people believed something simple about cleaning products. If you found one that worked, it would always work the same way. The bottle might change, the label might get updated, but the formula inside, that was supposed to stay consistent. After all, if a product was cleaning your kitchen, your bathroom, or your floors effectively, why would a company change it? But behind the scenes, cleaning products are constantly evolving. And sometimes, those changes happen so quietly that millions of people continue using the same product, without realizing it's no longer exactly the same. This story begins inside a product development meeting at a major cleaning product company. No cameras, no announcements, just a group of chemists, engineers, and executives reviewing numbers on a screen. The numbers weren't about cleaning performance. They weren't about customer satisfaction, they were about cost. One ingredient, a key component in the product's cleaning formula, had become more expensive, not dramatically more expensive, but enough that, across millions of bottles, it would significantly affect the company's bottom line, and so the discussion began. Could the ingredient be replaced, not removed entirely? Just swapped for something similar, something cheaper. Something that performed close enough. From a chemistry standpoint, the idea made sense. Most cleaning products are built from a few core components. Surfactants to break down grease and dirt, solvents to dissolve stubborn residues, fragrance to create that familiar clean smell, and preservatives to keep the formula stable over time. If one ingredient could be replaced without dramatically changing performance, the savings could be enormous. The chemists went to work. They tested alternative surfactants. They adjusted concentrations. They modified the balance between cleaning agents and stabilizers. In laboratory conditions, the new formula performed almost identically to the original. Grease still dissolved, surfaces still looked clean. The product still foamed. From a technical perspective, the change seemed safe. But there was one concern: real-world use. Because cleaning doesn't happen in a laboratory. It happens in kitchens, bathrooms, garages, and living rooms. Different surfaces, different water conditions, different habits, and sometimes small changes in a formula can produce noticeable differences over time. The chemists presented their findings. The product still worked, the cost savings were significant. And that's when someone in the room reportedly said something that has echoed across the industry for decades. They won't notice the decision was made, the formula would change. But the packaging would not, no announcement. No label on the front saying new formula. No explanation to consumers, just a quiet update to the ingredient list on the back of the bottle. Within months, the reformulated product began appearing on store shelves. And just like that, millions of households began using a slightly different version of a product they trusted. At first, nothing seemed different. The bottle looked the same, the scent was unchanged. The product still cleaned surfaces, but slowly, something interesting began to happen. Some consumers started noticing subtle differences, not dramatic changes. Nothing that would immediately trigger alarm, but small details. The product didn't cut through grease quite as quickly. It required a little more scrubbing. Sometimes it left behind a faint residue where it hadn't before. Online forums began filling with familiar questions. Did they change the formula? This used to work better. Am I imagining this? Or is it not as strong as it used to be? For many people, the difference was too small to matter. They continued buying the product out of habit. But for others, especially those who relied on the product for heavy cleaning, the change was noticeable. And here's where the story becomes more interesting. Because this wasn't just about one product. It reflected a broader pattern across the cleaning industry. Formulas change all the time, sometimes to improve safety, sometimes to comply with new regulations, sometimes to reduce environmental impact, and sometimes simply to reduce cost. The ingredient that was replaced in this particular case was part of the surfactant system. Surfactants are the workhorses of cleaning products. They allow water to mix with oil. They break apart grease. They lift dirt from surfaces so it can be rinsed away. But not all surfactants are equally powerful. Some are extremely effective at cutting through heavy grease. Others are milder, designed to be gentler on skin and surfaces. The original ingredient had been chosen years earlier because it offered strong cleaning performance. The replacement ingredient was slightly less aggressive. Still effective, still functional, but not identical. And that's the trade-off companies often face. Stronger cleaning power versus lower cost, performance versus efficiency. In many cases, the differences are small enough that most consumers never notice. But when millions of people use a product daily, even small changes can become part of a larger pattern. Over time, the reformulated product became the new normal. New customers never knew the original formula. Longtime users either adapted or switched brands. And the company moved on to the next improvement, the next cost adjustment, the next reformulation. Because in the world of consumer products, change is constant. But what happened next reveals something even more fascinating. Because once one company proved that a formula could be adjusted without major backlash, other companies began exploring similar changes. And slowly, quietly, the entire category began to shift. Once that first formula change proved successful, or at least quiet enough to avoid major backlash, something subtle but powerful happened inside the industry. Competitors noticed, they always do in the world of consumer goods. Companies constantly analyze each other's products. They buy them off store shelves, send them to labs, break them down ingredient by ingredient, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. Because if one company finds a way to reduce costs without losing customers, every competitor needs to understand how. So chemists across multiple companies began examining the reformulated product. They noticed the adjusted surfactant system. They saw the slight reduction in cleaning strength. And they saw something even more important: sales hadn't dropped. That was the signal, because in large consumer industries, one thing matters above almost everything else: consumer behavior. If customers continue buying a product, it means the change, whatever it was, stayed within what companies call the tolerance zone. The product still worked well enough, still felt familiar enough, still met expectations just enough to avoid triggering mass rejection. And that gave other companies permission to experiment, quietly, gradually, one product at a time. Across the cleaning aisle, small adjustments began happening. A slightly different surfactant here, a lower concentration of solvent there. Fragrance systems tweaked to maintain the same scent profile even as the formula underneath changed. Because fragrance plays a powerful role in perception. When something smells the same, people often assume it works the same, even if the underlying chemistry has shifted. This is something product designers understand very well. The sensory experience, smell, texture, foam, often matters more to consumers than the actual performance differences. If a cleaner smells fresh and foams well, it feels effective, even if it requires slightly more effort to achieve the same result. Over time, these small adjustments added up. The cleaning products on store shelves today are not identical to the ones sold 20 or 30 years ago. In many cases, they are less aggressive, less chemically intense, sometimes more environmentally friendly, but also, in some cases, less powerful than older formulations. And that change didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, quietly, one formula at a time. There were other forces shaping these decisions as well. Regulation played a role. Certain chemicals once used in cleaning products became restricted or banned due to environmental or health concerns. Phosphates, for example, were widely used in detergents for decades because they enhanced cleaning performance. But they were eventually limited in many regions because they contributed to water pollution and algal blooms. When those ingredients were removed, companies had to reformulate. Sometimes the new formulas performed slightly differently. But over time, consumers adapted. Environmental pressure also influenced change. As awareness of sustainability grew, companies began promoting greener cleaning products, biodegradable ingredients, plant-based surfactants, reduced chemical intensity. These changes were often positive, but they also required balancing performance with environmental goals. And again, that balance sometimes meant subtle differences in how products worked. Then there was the issue of safety. Stronger chemicals often clean better, but they can also irritate skin, damage surfaces, or produce stronger fumes. Modern formulations tend to prioritize user safety more than older ones did, which means they are often designed to be less harsh, easier to handle, safer for everyday use. All of these factors, cost, regulation, environment, safety, push the industry in the same direction, toward formulas that were optimized not just for performance, but for a complex mix of priorities. And through it all, the changes remained largely invisible to the average consumer. Because companies rarely advertise reductions, they advertise improvements. New and improved, now with better cleaning power, advanced formula. Even when the underlying change is subtle or driven by factors other than performance, but occasionally consumers do notice. And when they do, it usually starts the same way, a small comment. This doesn't seem as strong as it used to be, then another. I have to scrub more than before, then discussions online. Comparisons between old and new bottles, ingredient lists examined side by side. And suddenly, what was once invisible becomes a conversation. But here's the key point. Most people don't notice, or if they do, they adapt. They use a little more product, they scrub a little longer. They change their expectations slightly and life goes on. Because cleaning products are part of routine, habit, and habits are hard to break. Which brings us back to that original decision. A single ingredient change, a quiet adjustment, a belief that consumers wouldn't notice. In a way, the statement was both right and wrong. Most consumers didn't notice. But the ones who did revealed something important. People pay more attention than companies sometimes expect. And when enough small changes accumulate, they begin to reshape entire categories. Today, when you pick up a bottle of cleaning product, you're not just holding a single formula. You're holding the result of decades of incremental decisions. Decisions about cost, performance, safety, environmental impact, and consumer perception, all layered together into something that feels simple: spray, wipe, clean, but behind that simplicity is a complex story. A story of quiet changes, invisible adjustments, and one decision made years ago that helped redefine what goes into the products we use every day. So the next time you clean your kitchen counter or wipe down your bathroom sink, take a moment to consider something most people never think about. The product in your hand may not be the same one people used a generation ago, even if the label looks exactly the same. And sometimes, the biggest changes in everyday life are the ones that happen so quietly that nobody notices them at all.